Morning. I'm Arthur. I'm alcoholic. Also an addict. I think I've come to believe that I don't know that any step has more depth than this one. Truthfully, I think there's a lot of meat and potatoes right here, because it calls on everything, if you're going through this work, that you've been doing prior to be put to the test. It really beckons each individual to put up or shut up. I think the temptation, is obviously going through the process as I did and am and still going through, is to, especially fresh on the other side of it. If you've come into Big Book Step Study, when I first came into Step Study, it was a place that really pissed me off, and then it was a place like most people, because I came in knowing everything, and I came in thinking I had something I was going to bring, and I came in, thinking, how dare you? Not that I had anything behind me to put me in a position of importance, because I didn't. I came in with a lot of baggage, but yet there I was saying, how dare you? And I'd say that to point out the mindset that I think we come in with, and at least for myself anyways. So going through the work, I think, coming in a step study, finally succumbing to the fact that you don't know everything, and finally realizing that, you're in a world of crap, and you really need to make some changes or else. And sitting for a long period of time in step study meetings and not adding anything to anything makes you excited to run right out after the fourth step, start banging on doors, and that is, I think that's a real healthy motive. And finally, I'm probably at this point, I was motivated by something actually pure, something healthy. There was still selfishness in that. I mean, ultimately there is. I don't know if I can defer to it as or call it a healthy selfishness, because there's still that part. There's still that internal expectation. I can tell myself that it's not there. I can pray it to not be there, but it's there. And I think, given that I just spent 2 years and 7 notebooks, I think God understands why it's there, to some degree. And the expectation is that this is really going to work. And it's a healthy expectation. It's faith at that point. And, but I realize years later, through conversating with people very close to me, having made those initial amends, with a couple of very tight family members, very immediate family members. There were things, even when I asked the question, have I left anything out? There were things I left out. And let me tell you something, I was kind of floored, because I spent a long time praying about it, I spent a long time writing about it, I bounced it off of other people, I had done all this work. How could I possibly have left anything out? It was kind of like, are you kidding me? And that's what was in my mouth, and didn't come out, but in my head, I said that to my wife. I said, we were having this conversation about a year ago, and it had come up, and making amends, and the work that I'd done, and make no mistake about it, the work that I dragged her through. I'm at home, I'm writing an inventory, I'm absent again. Make no mistake about it, you drag your family through the getting better also. So when we sat down and we were talking about it, and my wife she's non-alcoholic, and she drinks, and she was having a drink, and a vodka and cranberry, and, so she was about halfway through her first drink, and she'll only drink about two, and so she loosened up a little bit, and we were talking about it, and I said, so, I'm not sure how the conversation led to that point, but she said, I said, so, we should probably revisit this question, or this thing that we kind of left. You had mentioned that I'd left some, possibly left some stuff out. And she just kind of relaxed back in her chair and looked up and glazed at me with her eyes and smiled and said, "No, not now." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, when you want to, just let me know." The scar is deep. If you think you've hit it all, you probably haven't. So stop thinking it. There's a lot there that takes place that you don't know about. Keep in mind that we've come into this where we're a group of people who have been, are noted in the book as being extreme cases. We are at the top end, we are the extreme self-centered, the extreme selfish, the extreme fearful. So you can't rely entirely upon your own thought process, even having done all this work, and think you've covered it all. And I wanted to point that out because it's about making attempts towards getting better. It's about progressing. It's about finally being on the right side of the street and getting well. And that's what I've learned. And so does it hurt? Did it hurt my pride to hear her say that? Well, of course it did. Well, why would it hurt my pride? Well, because I still at some level subconsciously operate on pride. And why do I operate on pride? Well, because I don't feel good about myself. Why don't I feel good about myself? Because I still trust in myself at some level. And that just shows me, in order, how much closer I need to draw towards God. The 9th step is the treadmill that'll get you there. It is the proof in the pudding. Don't sit around talking about the amends that you're going to make. Make the amends. You didn't talk about the bag you were going to get. You didn't talk about what you were going to do. You broke down doors and did it if you were like me. You stole from your parents if you had to. You stole from your wife, your husband, your children if you had to. So don't pussyfoot around with it. Like, seriously. Like, remember, you come into these halls and we're broken. We're not here because we're okay. Okay? You're wearing your own clothing, but underneath it, you're all in Johnny's, the same color, and slippers like me. Okay? Remember, like it says, and I'll quote the book, we deal with alcohol. It's cunning and it's baffling. It happens under the surface. It's constantly present. You're broken. You're not here because you're well. You come to an AA meeting so that you don't open an old wound and continue to break people and break yourself. I showed up here today because I'm sick, because I have an illness, like a diabetic, like a cancer patient, that I constantly have to treat. I constantly, and I'll even retract that statement, because I don't actually do the treating. I just walk to my car and show up on time. I put myself in the circumstance. Something happens once I'm there that has nothing to do with me. I leave with something that I didn't go to a store and buy, and it's given to me freely. I just showed up at the meeting. Call it God, call it Allah, call it whatever you want. But there's a power that takes place spiritually through these rooms and psychologically, that when I show up and I put myself in the presence of God, I leave a better man for it, for that day, for that moment. So I went out and started making my amends right away, and my wife was the first, and it was really, I was really numb. I felt like I was kind of going through the motions with that, and I was doing what I was asked to do and what I had committed myself to doing when I took my third step. Because I'm still in my commitment. You know, we make a decision to get better. We make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God in step 3, and you prove it by writing your 4th step, and you prove it again when you tell somebody in your 5th step, and you prove it again when you get down and ask God to remove the defects of character in 6 and 7, and you prove it again when you sit down and extract the names from your inventory, and you prove it again when you go out and knock on a damn door. If you're not doing those things, then you're not living in the decision. You're still running. And if you're still running, you're probably going to get sick again. You might not have picked up a drink, but believe me, it comes out sideways. It comes out in food. It comes out in sex. It comes out in money. It comes out in everything else. But make no mistake, it's going to come out. Hopefully it doesn't come out all twisted and bent up and start bending up other people around you so that you have more amends to make. I understand the way that I operate from day to day, and I'm very, very cautious with what's happening. I'm very cautious to watch my thought process. I'm very cautious to be in a state of prayer throughout the day. I'm cautious to make decisions that I feel are God-centered, not Arthur-centered. I do that because I'm afraid. Because I'm afraid I'm going to repeat what I've done. And because I'm tired and I don't want to repeat the things that I've done. I don't want to have to keep making amends. It's great, and 4th step and step study and process. I'm out making amends. That's great. Well, after you've done it for 10 or 15 years, you don't want to have to make amends anymore. You get to the point where, you know, in the beginning, it's a proud thing you're doing because you're finally stepped up to the plate and cleaning up your side of the street. Oh, that's great. But people you've hurt are like, this was like really? Like you owed this to me. You actually looking for a pat on the back? Like you hurt me. Why are you seeking an acknowledgement? Like, I make an amends. I don't ask for anything. Listen, I'm here to tell you, this is what I did. If you have a minute, I would like to tell you that I understand what I did. Well, what do you mean? Can you sit down? Do you recall this time? And you'll see their face like twerk, and you'll see their body tense up. Just know that was you. When you can shift somebody emotionally like that by either a word, you know, you ran a knife deep at some point because it still causes them to come out of their normal state, to shift, to be in pain. So at that point, it's very humbling because then there's ownership. You're either taking ownership of it at that point. You're owning it. You're owning the dirt. You're owning their fear. You're owning what happened. And if you're genuinely trying to get better, they'll feel that. But you don't get to ask them if they felt it. You don't get to ask them if things are okay now. You don't get to ask for affirmation of whether or not your amends was thorough. The only thing we get to ask is, did I leave anything out? They may lie to you and say, no. But you can't probe at that point. You can't continue to spread the wound. They just simply might not be ready to talk about it. You know I'm going to get the smackdown from my wife. It's just a matter of time. She's going to hammer down. And I'm going to be like, yeah, remember that. I know there's a lot that I don't remember. But trust me, she remembers all of it. And, unfortunately, the vodka with her doesn't have the same effect it did with me, and she just gets even more like, we'll talk now, and me, I'm just running, I'm just about the party. So then I went to see my mom, and that was tricky because my mom wants to let me off the hook. And I knew that going in that she would try to let me off the hook. And I just tried to explain to her that I was ready to take ownership of some of these things that I had found in my writing. And she just smiled at me and, oh, honey, I love you. I remember that. Like letting me off the hook. And I knew that was going to happen. So what I did was I doubled down. I kind of redoubled my efforts after the amends and really stepped it up a notch with when I spent time with her, was talking with her to make sure that I was really extra careful. I tried to be as sensitive as I could be to conversation and dialogue that we had, really trying to hear the words behind her words. Because, naturally, if you hurt somebody, it's going to affect the way that they share a relationship with you. And it might not always be so obvious, but be sure that after you've spent a long time being the director and your actions and thought process have caused those around you to start to not be who they really are for the sake of making you happy, it takes a long time until they actually start to be honest with you. Because they've walked on eggshells for a long time. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it's our job to do what Al-Anon does for the people that we've hurt. Because they have work to do too. But I can't show up after being the committer and say, I'm glad we made that amends. You should think about Al-Anon. I'm not in a position where I can dictate, where I can give suggestion at that point. And the ninth step really tells us very, very clearly what the goal is. And you stick to it. Because the temptation to walk outside of that, if you're tempted, you can guarantee it's coming from some type of internal temptation that you have, or some need you have, or some want you have. And don't go out and make an amends to get someone to like you again. You know what? Don't even bother. Like, stay home. Like, don't do that. Well, I remember we had a good relationship. Maybe when I do this, things will get better. Well, if that's the motive, then you're not ready. I'm speaking about it because I've been through it and I know it. I was at the gas station a couple weeks ago, and an ex-girlfriend was there, and I noticed her, and I haven't made an amends to her. And I saw her, and I started to, the thought was, oh, shit, one of these. And then I quickly looked up at her again, drew a breath. I knew exactly what I needed to say to her. She was getting a Subway sandwich, so I was starting to make my way over towards her, and as I cleared the counter, there was her little son. I'm not going to approach her. I'm not going to be the martyr. I'm not going to do it because AA says and the process says I should do it at her son's expense, who's going to go, Mommy, who was that? There'll come another time. I know she's married. I know that she not only has one child, but two. And I'm certainly not going to do it until the time's appropriate to do it. So I turned and walked away so that she didn't see me. I don't want to be on her mind. I was on her mind at one point, and it wasn't a good experience. So why would I want to shake that skillet again? I learned how to be sensitive to these things when I saw what I did through my inventory, and God revealed to me in time what I was doing. And now I'm very sensitive to it. And the progression that's come through this process, and the promises talk about this, is we won't regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. I utilize what I've gone through when I'm thinking about it, when I'm contemplating it, when I'm just, passing thought, remembering all the time that, every day when I wake up and I go out and I do life, that I'm going with a handicap, okay? So, and I don't say that to play a violin or feel bad for me. I mean, these are just things that I think privately. So I know I'm going out with a handicap, so when I wake up, I'm already sensitive to the fact that I need to be careful about my days. I don't have the luxury of not giving a shit, is what I'm saying. Okay? I handed over that luxury a long time ago. When I passed that line that happened somewhere along my alcoholism. So it just means that I've got to work harder than maybe someone who doesn't have this disease has to work. Not to say that people who are non-alcoholic don't need to be as sensitive or work as hard. I'm not going to play that judge. I'm just saying that I feel like we have to be a little bit more careful, because there's a lot to risk. If you've done all this work and you're trying and you've started to make your amends, there's even more to risk. And you're dealing with a psychological issue, a mental issue, you can't do it alone. You absolutely cannot do this by yourself. If your mind is broken, how ever would you think you could find your own resolve? Only an alcoholic would be that egocentric, that self-centered, to think after the tornado demonstration they gave us on page 84, that, you know what, I got this. It's that strange mental gray spot that's talked about in the steps. That blank spot. That utter inability to differentiate the truth from the false. Don't think because you wrote a 4-step, suddenly you got the truth. You didn't. You absolutely did not. All you did was break the surface. Mm-hmm. And I know that from experience. That's what happened. I broke the surface. And I don't want to say that to discourage anybody who's going to start writing. Trust me, you start writing, your eyes will open up. You'll be eager to run out and start making things right, because you'll have a new set of eyes. And you can see things now that you couldn't see when you were in it. And that certainly propels you along, and you draw a lot from that. And then when you start making amends, your confidence level goes from I suck to I'm actually worth something. Because now you're out doing what you should have done a long time ago, so that natural sense of, I finally feel like I'm walking around like if normal exists, now I'm doing it. So that brings on a huge sense of confidence and self-confidence and self-worth as well. And people around you will see that. But don't be upset if they're still gun-shy. Don't be upset if they haven't forgiven. That's none of your business. You can't be pissed off at somebody because you made an amends 3 years ago, and occasionally it comes out sideways from them. You have no business to say or do anything other than to say, I understand. The work is part of it. The change occurs because of the work. We start to get into a relationship with God, and in order to maintain that relationship, it has to be based in truth. So don't run from this. Don't go into it with an expectation. You're here because, if you're like me, you want to be better than you were. That's the motive. God's going to make that possible through these steps. You're going to go out and do your side of it, or you're not. And if you don't, you'll end up, if you're like me, eventually in enough pain where you'll drink again after you've used every other thing you can to make you feel better. And you exhausted it. And you'll come back and say, oh, I'm just coming back. Yeah, I don't want to be the just coming back. It's possible for me. I don't want to do that. Just coming back because you didn't do what you were supposed to do. That's it. It's that simple. Everything we're doing has to be based in utter honesty. And if you can't be utterly honest, then your effort better be 100%. I think God judges us based on what we're trying to do. And you're going to fail. You're going to drop the ball. You're not going to do it perfectly. So stop walking around thinking you can actually do a perfect amends that you can then go to step study and say, I just made 9 amends this week. 9. Stop it. Stop it. Remember why we're doing it. That's great. You made 9 apologies that should have been made 9 years ago. Good for you. When did you grow up? Seriously. So, the process is, this work is utterly amazing and exciting. It's perfect in almost every way. It doesn't need you to dirty the waters. Just all we have to do is follow directions and follow instructions. We came from a place when we were our own instruction, when we were our own direction, and we were everything. And now look at where you're sitting. And then all of a sudden, how many notebooks suddenly becomes valuable. That only happens in step study. You bring that outside of these rooms with those 7 notebooks and go to somebody who works at CVS and say, take a look at that. They're gonna fucking lock you up. They're gonna throw away the key. Like, really? I don't want to read that. What the hell's wrong with you? That's what's gonna happen. That has value here amongst us. So don't get it twisted. Don't let it pump the ego. I mean, we've had enough ego inflation. It's about ego deflation. You don't need it. Don't draw your energy from the things your brain comes up with. They suck. And they're so short-lived. We draw our energy from the actions that we take and the results that happen as a result of those actions, which are fueled by the one thing I want, which is a consistent relationship with God. I don't want to be the guy that could have. I don't want to be the good story in AA for somebody to talk about. And that's what my sponsor said to me. He said, you don't have to do this work. That's fine. You'll make a good story for me to discuss at a meeting. That's exactly what and he was flat out serious when he said it. I don't want to be a good story. Now, just, to give you some perspective, I was going through this work. I was probably halfway through my 4th step and feeling better about things and feeling like I was finally doing something. And one of the things that I recall doing was when Greendale Mall had those little kiosks that you could go and you could have your face put onto things. This is kind of embarrassing, but I did my face on one of the little kids' rulers that said, "Watch me grow." And that was my present for my sponsor. Now I look back on that and go, what the fuck? That didn't even have anything to do with him. Like, it's supposed to be a gift for that person, not a gift, like put myself in a picture in a frame and hand it to him. Halfway through this work, like everything about me when I was doing that was like, oh wow, this is going to be amazing. Like, this is so, I can't, look at how different I am. Look at how much I've changed. And then he opened it and was like, thanks. I put that on the fridge next to my kid's handprint. Like, even at, and I love what the book says, because it says even at our best moments, and I reflect back to that statement when I think of that story. Even in my best moment, it was an utter failure. And but the point is, I couldn't even really give a gift. I've had to learn how to give gifts to people, because I always come from Arthur first. And that's not a gift. That's not a gift. My mother, our relationship has changed quite a bit since this work. I've changed quite a bit since this work. As a result, the people around me have changed. And so I feel like occasionally I can say something intelligent and I can say the truth. And so she went away to Vegas and had gotten married recently, and she came back and she brought me a hat. Now, first of all, the hat is the one you get at the hotel. So she gives me this hat, and we're standing at the counter, and I just offered her a cup of coffee, and I'm looking at the hat. She goes, "What's wrong?" I don't want that hat. You just did that in passing. I don't want your secondhand gift. I don't want you, and we were joking, and she started laughing, and I said, no, I appreciate it. And she goes, well, I just didn't have time. The truth. Okay, that's all right. And I gave her a hug and told her I loved her and threw the hat away. I don't want the hat. The hat's red, it's black, it says Las Vegas. I wasn't there. Why would I ever want that hat any more than my sponsor wanted Watch Me Grow? Right? That's the point of the story. So I threw it out. And she laughed at it. She laughed. She told me the truth. The truth was she didn't have time. But she felt guilty, so her guilt caused something else. Those are the things that happen under the surface. So when you're making amends, be sure there are many things like those examples that have happened under the surface you do not remember. You won't remember it until God sees fit for you to remember it. So just know you clean up the heavy stuff, the stuff the stuff you've recalled in your inventory, but don't walk away thinking you did it. You didn't do anything. Honestly, you didn't do anything. You did exactly what you're supposed to do, because you don't want to end up with another lion or another needle in your arm or another bottle in your mouth. That's why you're doing it. Okay? It's about ownership. And if you're not going to own it, you're wasting your time. You can't do it because it's internal. You can own it with your lips and say, I do, and I'm sorry, but if the ownership isn't psychological and it's not spiritual, then it's not real ownership. It has to be threefold. Physical is when you go out and do it. Psychological is when you know you're taking ownership of it. Emotional is when you know, spiritual is when you've done it with God and you know it's the truth. That's amends. That's it from my experience. Thank you.